All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Gina and Andy's Crystal Cruise.
Yay!
We are on episode 4.
Welcome back. It's so lovely to see you again and to be speaking to you once more. And today we're gonna talk about the entire course that we have been part of, and also we're gonna speak about the Mesh Gathering that took place last weekend.
So, Gina, where are we in the sort of landscape of IKYA's teachings right now?
Well, I guess we're both kind of closing off a round of crystals. That has been an introductory round. And yet, we're also starting a new cycle with the IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing too.
Yeah.
Which, we're going to talk about later probably.
And then what ended up weaving its way into this whole adventure is the IKYA Mesh Gathering, the enlightenment celebration that occurred this past weekend.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it was only 5 days ago.
I know, it feels like it was longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so much happened after that.
Absolutely. And I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective or a different wording of not closing off, because these beauties from IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing Collection 1 are part of us. They're energetic organs now. They're working with us continuously. But I feel it's more like being on a travel. It's like we're emerging out of one forest and coming out into this clearing, a meadow. And then the IKYA Mesh Gathering descended upon us. And then we'll be entering into the next landscape or the next group of landscapes, the 12 crystals of Collection 2.
Yeah.
So, so for me, it doesn't, I just wanted to say, it doesn't
That
feel
is so
like
true.
a closing off.
No, it's not. It's just a chapter that we finished reading, and then we're moving on to the next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So.
that's a beautiful way. It's basically like we're turning the page, and that group of chapters is now done, and we're entering into 12 new chapters, a new section of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how has this all been for you, Andy? This whole experience.
I mean, we started on the 12th of February, 2020, believe it or not, and there were inklings of the whole COVID, coronavirus thing starting, and but you know, we didn't really, here in Norway, of course, we're not really in the mainstream, so I don't think we were too concerned or up on it, and then it sort of just exploded onto the scene. And the fun thing, this course and this journey adapted.
Yeah.
You know, we had planned on one crystal landscape every month, but in I think it was in March that we decided, okay, we need to think a little bit differently, and by the third crystal, green Kambaba Jasper, we had to extend the amount of time we were going to have with each crystal. And there were a number of reasons for it, but the biggest one also was, I think it took to the third crystal for people to really wake up to what this course is all about. That it's intense, it's compact, it's a lot of spiritual principles and teachings delivered through one beautiful little package per month.
Yeah. It has been so packed with information, both on the inner and like from IKYA and like real teachings and workshops. So it's been continuous. And I felt I also joined the course 1 month later. So I was
That's right.
I was part from like, I think it was March. It was the 12th of March, because I remember when I went home, I couldn't go to work the next day because everything was closed.
Oh, yeah.
For
Yeah. That's right. I think the 12th of March is the date that they mark the start of the pandemic in the United States. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it was like spot on.
my
I'm
gosh.
in and then I'm out. That was fascinating. That was no coincidence at all. And you just, the closing off meant that you could just really focus on your inner work, because you were with yourself basically all the time anyways. So when we reached the green kambaba, for me it was like, oh, I can dive into this more. I can go into the depth, because I had been like working with like 2 crystals, like having a new one every second week.
Yeah, you weren't the only one who joined a little late, so there were like a dozen people, I think, who were working with amethyst and yellow aventurine together.
Yes.
Which I imagine was a lot.
I can confirm that it was. That was also a mesh, and I think it was good because it kind of, knocked the feet from under me somehow.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's often good because I've had quite rigid patterns. So when I lose track of time and track of myself, that's often a good thing. So that happened.
Yeah. Well, and so what is also really interesting when I look at how this last year unfolded, I don't think anybody was ready for the level to which IKYA's teachings and his cooperation with the Gemstone Guardians, how strongly that was going to play out in our everyday life. Yeah. Because normally when we, to my understanding, again, I'll just share, I don't have a strong sort of spiritual tradition or seekership in a way in this lifetime. So I don't have any of that sort of karma or baggage of having worked with lots of different teachers or traditions or other things and all that. So I don't really know how it works, but I've gotten the idea that most of the time you work with a teacher, you receive teachings, you meditate, you do all that kind of stuff, but that's it. Like you can, in a way, you can maintain the illusion that your spiritual journey is almost separate from life.
I think it's often a very secluded space, or kind of withdrawn from life, and that's kind of the point of it. I haven't done that either. I've been kind of allergic to it. So I didn't dive into anything like this before I had the IKYA experience either, which was for me a really good starting point. So I totally agree with you.
In IKYA, he talks about and teaches that spirituality is only real when we live it. Like it's really like we're only really integrating and showing that we've understood by living it. But I think for me, at least in observing the different formats, because within IKYA, he's been so creative and provided, IKYA meditation, IKYA healing, the IKYA therapy platform and the whole schooling and treatments and all of that, seminars, silent retreats, you name it, all these different ways. But when I really look at this whole world that IKYA has created with his teachings, this is the course that just like took our faces and planted them in the dirt and said, you've got to eat it, breathe it, like live it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not yet real.
You are so right. And but it's kind of both things at the same time, because yes, you have been facing your life maybe more severely than you normally do, and more actively and with a bigger perspective. But at the same time, the crystals has also made me at least see that it's made me quicker in understanding the mechanisms behind. So then when I am in a conflict and I am in a situation, it's like, now I'm doing this, and I can see that more spot on, and then I can stop doing that. And it's not always that I can do it so immediately, but that mechanism, that speed of understanding has really increased. So I don't have to, or I found myself able to, I don't have to jump into the mud literally every time. I can see that there is mud, and I can choose. And
I can remember that last time when I walked into something like that, it didn't go so well.
I can choose to jump in it. I can choose to go around, or or
hop over it, or turn around and go the other way.
Yeah.
I wonder if that also, because there's just so much that feels unique about this journey that we've been on, and when I look at the level of active both active and actively experienced support from the crystals, from the guardians, from all of the other assistants that may be around these crystals and this course. That also, to me, maybe speaks to that quickness of recognition and being able to, again, because it's a whole practice from the recognition of the pattern or the misunderstanding to trying out something different, evaluating the results, and then repeat and do that, but do that consciously and dynamically, sort of adjusting that idea of like, in the end, it's up to us to adapt and adjust to life and reality, not the other way around. And that the level of support that we get, I mean, it's palpable. It's almost physical.
It is. In many instances, it is. And you can actually feel the assistance and the presence of the guardians and the stones and that energy that comes with them. And it's actually, I've been afraid most of my life, like fearful of doing little changes to just about anything, you know. Whereas now I feel, no, not that much can happen. You know, I'm supported and I can feel that support. And I think it's the experience I didn't have as a child that much, because I was challenged and that was part of my path, and I learned like enormously from that. But now it's kind of time to let go of that fear and that experience and just move on to whatever's next. And my willingness and excitement in doing just that is is increasing. And it's not like everything is gone in a split second, but at least that scale, that balancing of that scale with excitement and fear is just like slowly shifting in the favor of excitement. And I think for kind of the first time, it feels gradually more safe to be alive and to explore and to. I'm starting to understand that I can actually choose from myself, for myself, and that's actually what I'm here to do. I never had that before, and that is because of that continuous assistance, both from IKYA and the Gemstone Guardians. That is, like you say, very palpable. It's present, and you will know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really beautiful, concrete step toward freedom, from my perspective.
It's like the parents I never had.
But okay, that's beautiful, because I love that the typical image that we create about freedom is I'm doing it all by myself, and I get to choose, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, actually, freedom, as I talked about at the first Mesh Gathering in October, one aspect of freedom is that 100% freedom is 100% responsibility for all your choices and all of the consequences. And then when I look at another beautiful aspect that you just talked about, maybe without knowing it, at least from my perspective, is freedom is also recognizing that I'm not here alone. I'm part of oneness. Oneness is part of me. And everything I do is supported and loved by so much of life, or all of life. So.
And that's the experience. And I also, I think I saw this program, was a documentary about kids and how they evolve when they're little. And it kind of showed that if parents are attentive and show affection, they will become the explorers because they have a safe starting point. But if parents are not present and they are kind of left to themselves, they go into stress mode because they feel they have to figure out, how do I do this life, and they're not ready for it.
Survival becomes so central then.
And that's when you withdraw. So if you have that safe environment, you can go wherever because there's always someone to come back to. And this is what I've been feeling with this course, that like it's always there. I can go wherever and it's still gonna be there. And it's been such like, I had to reach 40 before I had that experience.
43 here, so there's something about the 40s. So now we're in this open meadow between the landscapes of the crystals, and suddenly last weekend, this beautiful mesh, this netting, this spider web of connection sort of came down and enveloped us.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you? How does the mesh fit into this whole thing? Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the mesh was kind of a silent retreat for 50 hours. And it started on Friday, and then there was satsangs with IKYA, and then there were meditational hours in between, and then there were also workshops with many of the teachers here at the center. And it was interwoven in a very clever way, because or at least my span for meditation is somehow limited sometimes.
Me too.
So when I've been to silent retreats before, there's been like rough patches where you kind of have to stretch, but you don't really have the muscles to stand your ground like all the time. But what was so clever this time was that the workshops would introduce you a theme and a task to do for the coming hours of meditation. And that just changed the game for me completely, because I was given something new to concentrate on and work on, so that when I had worked on trust or truth for a couple of hours, someone would appear on the screen, I could interact, I could relate, because there were beautiful stories told too, and then I could work on something differently. And that was so great, and I think what you are seeing, that I'm also experiencing, is that it's that same way of going into a landscape. This time it was a personal space to see how things were situated. Could you cleanse something in there? Was it a dark room? Was it a light room? What do you want to do with it? And it's been a little like that working with the crystals as well. I guess you have some similar experiences, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, you laid out the mesh really nicely, and it was, satsang with IKYA, 3 hours of meditation with focus on the principles that he had focused on in the teaching. Then the same thing, we get a workshop with a sharing from one of IKYA's students about how they've been wrestling with a particular principle, and then an exercise from IKYA with that focus again on bring yourself into that space and actively work with that principle. And to your point, could you let something go? Could you evolve something? Could you practice a technique? Or and what's really fun is, until it kind of unfolded, I didn't realize how parallel the Mesh Gathering and this type of spiritual retreat is to the whole IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing course.
Right.
It's kind of like taking that month in a crystal landscape and putting it into a satsang plus 3 hours of meditation. And then you sort of arise out of that meditation and go into the next workshop, a different principle, different angle, different crystal, for example, and then deep into meditation, work on that. And it was as active, because I think also I get the impression that a lot of other traditions approach silent retreat or meditation retreat as that's the primary goal, is quiet and focus and that kind of thing, but not necessarily setting almost goals or tasks, or like they're not working retreats, whereas this Mesh Gathering was such a working retreat.
It was all about doing the work, and it felt like for me, from having now lived a week after this mesh, it felt like it was the final task or job to do, so that I could incarnate and really integrate what I had been learning during the IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing 1 course. So it's kind of putting it into practice. It's like I had to sit with all that learning that I had embodied but not really understood. So I just needed that space with me. I chose to be alone this time, working on my own. And it's like it was this concluding space where I could just mature into all the learning I've had from the crystals.
That's a beautiful sort of, the idea of mature, sort of the work that had been birthed in the different landscapes of the crystals, then the mesh gathering was an opportunity to kind of mature those fruits in a way.
Yeah, and also activating it, because I was challenged by the individual teachers and also IKYA to dive deep into my own personal landscapes.
Yeah.
On personal subjects.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, no, you can't avoid it. This is what you're going to work on for the next couple of hours. You're going to go into it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you say so.
But I think that that's one of the great things about this combination of the crystal healing course and something like the mesh gathering is that the workouts that we've been doing the past year, plus the tools that we still have, I mean, most of the people that were involved, I think, were actively, implementing their tools, having crystals with them, switching around, you know, playing with, because that's, IKYA's always focused on giving us tools and perspectives and practices, any way for us to break through the patterns and the kind of the bull crap that we repeat over and over again, right? And get stuck in. So.
Yeah. So, how do you feel that this course changed you? What's the Andy of today like compared to?
I'm just going to share the anecdote that we talked about,
okay.
Where this week, after the mesh gathering, we're preparing for collection 2 of IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing, and right now we have 117 people times 12 crystals. That's a lot of crystals to get organized. It's a lot to do, and I was able to kind of just dive into the logistics and not get nearly as hung up in my typical sort of suffering stories of so much to do, overwhelm, I'll never get it done, never going to do it right, all of that kind of garbage. I just got stuff done. Until on, what was it, Wednesday morning, I had found a house that I was really interested in looking at, and it got sold before I could even go to a showing. And I had the most sort of childish, emotional reaction to losing something that I never had. It was just a fantasy, and it dissolved in an instant, as it was going to anyway, because we couldn't buy it. It just wasn't going to happen. But the level of emotional sort of outpouring in myself and my still inability to manage it, I just got completely sucked up into it, went on like an hour-long tirade about how in myself and speaking out loud like that I'm never going to work hard enough and make enough money to ever have a house and blah, 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 this whole thing. I destroyed 12 hours of a day with all of that negativity. And then the next morning I woke up, I meditated, I set an intention to love my family, to love my life, to be grateful. I actually set that intention, had a much more beautiful, productive day yesterday, and today has just been gung-ho, and I've gotten a lot of stuff done and feeling pretty good. And I look at that 12 hours, and as I told you, a couple of years ago, it could have been 12 months that I destroyed because of that kind of event, or 12 weeks, or 12 days, and now it's just 12 hours. And I look at that, yes, that has unfolded over time, but it's also, back to the word mature, I feel and experience myself as being more mature and more capable directly as a result of this course.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. And the transformation in you is very visible.
Oh, that's nice to hear. What about you? What has IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing done to Gina?
Whew. It's like, maybe I said this too. It's like it's cracked open the shell. The shell isn't entirely gone yet, but it's open. And yeah. And it's more like the world is for me to explore. In my own time, I need to build some more muscles before I dive in. That's what it feels like. Or maybe I don't. But the thing is, I get to choose. And 1 year ago, I did not understand that was what life could be like. 1 year ago, life was still pretty rough. Yeah. And I was coping, and I was struggling, and I was trying to do the right thing, mostly. And I had this experience in work on Friday before the Mesh Gathering. And then what happens is that often the energy from such an event will kind of seep into your being when it's approaching. So that was like the day before it started. We had this great meeting with a lot of choreographers.
Okay.
And I was very enthusiastic. That was just my setting in that meeting. And there was a comment or a question when we were rounding that meeting off. And I just misinterpreted that comment completely. So it's like, oh, there's a ball. And I kind of caught it. And then I just threw it like out in the bush. I just completely misunderstood the question, but I was so enthusiastic about it. So I just like, well, anyone's free to speak and la 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 la.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I was kind of informed that you kind of, she meant something completely different. So I made a mistake, kind of.
Yeah.
And I spent my entire evening laughing about having made that mistake. Whereas like a year ago, I think that would have kind of been like the end of my career. Like, how could I misinterpret that? How can I'm so stupid. I don't understand my field, you know? So, but I was just happy to have like, there's a ball and I'm gonna try and kick it. And it just ended up in the forest.
So great.
So.
I think that for me sort of actually rounds out this episode really well, because the cruise ship is sort of, we're a bit just sort of floating in the open field in between the crystal landscapes. And I think that both of our stories reveal that this work, it pays dividends in the small stuff, mostly. There can be some big breakthroughs occasionally.
Yeah.
But I think, for me at least, for my part, I'll say, I think that this kind of real, on-the-ground spiritual study and work, because it's beyond study, it's also working it out, wrestling with it, practicing it, getting dirty, and accepting that it takes getting dirty several times sometimes to understand why you're getting dirty in the first place, and how might I, to your point, go around the mud pit instead of continue to jump in and play around in it. But I think that for me, it just wanted to, I think for me, conclude anyway, that it's the small stuff. It pays off in the small stuff. It's the details of that everyday life that they mature, we get more competent, we're getting more mature, we're getting clearer about things. Yeah. And that matters.
I think we're also becoming the energy that the crystal represents. So it's like when I've found that in myself also, that when I've struggled with my mud baths or stones, pebbles in my shoes, for a while, it goes away. And it's not always because something happens that concludes it. Yeah. It just solves without me noticing, and then I move on to the next. So more than anything, I feel that this course has been giving me is this transformation. And it's, whereas I before was very materialistic, I needed to see proof out in the world that I was clever, competent, worthy, because I had stuff and people in my life that I liked. It's now shifting to more of an internal understanding that I am this. I don't need to see it every day to be it, because I simply am. And I think that's the transformation that is mostly, that's been like the most, the biggest breakthrough for me at least.
Well, and what a beautiful insight, because to my understanding, all manifestation, all of this it's always one step behind. So, and that's why it can be really frustrating and hard sometimes to practice when it isn't manifesting in life. But we have to practice first for it to manifest in life. Like, to your point, you need to believe in and stand in the transformation first, because manifestation always follows the vibration.
Right.
To my understanding, I'm not sure I'm saying it accurately, but so I think that's what you're pointing at, is that you're sort of, well, I don't know, that again, this is just a thought or my understanding that.
No, I think you're right. It resonates very well.
That you're sending out the vibration, but you've relaxed the need to see it immediately manifest out here, and just keep doing it, because it'll follow, because it'll be an echo, you know.
Eventually.
But eventually. It takes time. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. We just wanted to share how the mesh came in and meshed up and meshed with the IKYA Aligned Crystal Healing course.
Yeah.
And we'll be back shortly with another episode where we'll perhaps specifically look at the crystals that were in course 2, but more importantly, we're going to play a little game with each other and with you guys about sort of perceptualizing and projecting into collection 2 to see what we see might be coming up.
Yeah, because now we're kind of used to taking a challenge, so we decided to give ourselves a challenge. Yeah. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be reporting from the coming crystals as well. Yeah. Eventually, when the crystal healing course starts over.
Okay, so thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.